Back to Your Dose, a podcast where we speak to individuals with lived mental health experiences to help people feel less alone and more connected. In this episode, we speak with Jo, who shares her extraordinary journey battling depression, eating disorders, exercise dependence, and self-harm caused by the pressures of gymnastics and school peer pressure. We delve into her transformative experience of being sent to a psychiatric ward and receiving vital treatment, ultimately leading her on a path towards self-love and acceptance. Join us as we delve deeper into her struggle. Hi, Jo.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm also very good.
And whereabouts are you in the world today?
I'm from a small village in the south of Germany.
Amazing. And what do you think to Germany? I've literally only been to Berlin, so I've not got a huge amount of experience of the country.
I actually love it here. I think we have a great healthcare system. The nature is beautiful here, so I'm very, very happy to live here.
Yeah. I mean, obviously nature is very important, but definitely the healthcare system.
Yeah.
Is it free healthcare in Germany?
Well, I think so. I'm not sure though, but I think so. Well, it's like mostly free. It's a bit different than in the US, for example.
And how old are you?
I'm 19.
Very nice. So are you studying or what is your situation at the moment?
Well, I'm practically still in school, but I'm taking a gap year, and then in summer I'll do a year of volunteer work
Volunteering in what exactly?
at a school.
Ah,
Yeah.
so what do you know what you want to be in the future? A teacher is
Not
or
at all. I'm doing it to get my degree because if
okay,
I do, like, well, in Germany, if you do a year of volunteer work, you can get your A levels.
okay.
So that's why I'm doing it. Um, and I want to study international economics and IT after school.
Sounds difficult.
Mhm.
What what
Well,
what what do you want to be when you're older?
I want to work at a software company, so
Ah,
something like
okay.
software
So,
engineering.
software engineer development. Very
Yeah.
cool. Very interesting. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit more about you. But obviously, what we're here for today is to learn a little bit more about your experience with mental health. So, thank you so much for being brave enough to share your story today. So, I think, as always, the best question to start off with is what has your mental health journey been so far?
Well, I've struggled with my mental health, I think, when I was 12. I think that's when it started, and I fell very deep into depression. I actually had problems with self-harm for a long time. And I think when I was 16, it was good for a year or so. And then I started to really, really struggle with disordered eating and overexercising.
So, that was 16, you started
Yeah,
with the eating disorder issues, and obviously, you're 18 now.
19,
Yeah.
yeah.
So let's go back a little bit to, if you don't mind, talking about the depression when you were 12. Was that what? How did you recognize that? Obviously, 12-year-olds is very young.
Yeah.
Um, people, adults don't really know that they're depressed. So, what were the symptoms, and how did you get the support at that age and recognize that you actually had depression?
Well, I think it was kind of like a trend at school where
Mm.
people started to self-harm, which is ridiculous to say, but it was like everyone did it.
At 12.
Yeah, at 12, it was like totally
Wow.
crazy. And I think maybe it was like peer pressure or something at first, but
Yeah.
then I started to realize that I was like really, really in a bad mental place. And I really shut off all emotions and everything. And my parents noticed and they took me to a therapist, and the therapist like told me that I had like depression. And yeah. And it was a bit crazy to me because I thought like, oh no, I'm just like peer pressured into this. But I was actually very bad and I didn't even notice at first.
Wow. So would you say that like your life at 12 was pretty fine? Like, you had a good support system, life was good, but it was actually way more to do with just trying to fit in
Yeah.
with everybody else.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Mhm.
And how did how did it, because obviously social media when you were 12, I imagine, wasn't really a thing. So was it a case of, or was it a case of like just people coming into school and saying, "Oh, I don't know, I've self harmed today," and then it became a trend that way?
Yeah, I think it was more people at school. And I took gymnastic classes,
Oh,
and all the people there were always like in the dressing rooms, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, look at this! I did this!" And then it was literally ridiculous. It was, well, not that bad for most of the people, but still, it was such a ridiculous thing to do, and the trend didn't last for too long, obviously, but it
oh my
was
gosh, I can't.
it was
I'm
so
so
bad.
shocked that at 12 years old it
Yeah,
was a trend to self harm,
yeah.
because I know that the rise of social media definitely was it. Did you ever use Tumblr?
No, I didn't know.
So Tumblr was like a sort of an Instagram platform back in the day, and people
Yeah,
would upload pictures onto there, and you would get a lot of self harm imagery and stuff like that. But and that, I think that definitely contributed to things like eating disorders and self harm
for
then.
sure.
But to think that you weren't even using social media and this became a trend, it just shows how easy it is to be influenced as a young
Yeah,
person.
yeah,
Um, so obviously you had the self harm issue. Your parents took you to go go and get some help, and then you were diagnosed with depression. How did your parents deal with that, with their child at 12 years old self harming?
well, I think they didn't notice at first,
Hmm.
so they obviously didn't know how to deal with it. Um, but I don't know. It was very difficult for them
Hmm. I
because I
imagine.
I like, didn't talk to them
Right.
about like my stuff because I didn't know what was
You
going
didn't
on.
understand it either. So how can you
Yeah,
talk about something, yeah, you don't understand?
and I think I just wanted to fit in with everyone else.
Yeah.
So there was, well, for me in my head, there was no deeper meaning to it. So it was like very, very difficult for them.
Yeah. I can imagine. So the so then you had this depressive episode. How long did that last for?
Probably 3 years. It was very, very long.
Wow.
It was a lot of up and downs,
Yeah.
and it was, well, I felt totally crazy because like one day I'm super happy and over the moon, and then the next day I just
Yeah.
want to die. And that
Yeah.
was like not funny at 13. Like, ah,
How did you manage to maintain school? Do you think that affected you in any way with in education?
yeah, well, I think it helped me to have a structure in my day,
Yeah.
and I never struggled with getting out of bed that much. So that was pretty good with school. And I also saw kind of a social worker from school there who I went to regularly.
Okay.
So that was really good.
So in terms of the treatment then, was that the social worker was
Yes.
there to support you? Did you have any other form of treatment for depression at that time?
No. I saw this therapist once, but I did not like her. I also, because I thought I was so fine, and I really struggled to open up to other people. So
Yeah.
that was like my one person in school that I already knew. So yeah,
Yeah. I think it's a the acceptance part of it, isn't
yeah,
it? And
yeah,
if you can't accept it, then you won't want to receive
yes, for sure.
support. So what do you think it was that was there ever a turning point? Or did you just go from 3 years of the depression pretty much straight into the eating disorder? Or was there a period where you feel like you'd recovered?
Yeah, I think when I was 15, I was so good. I like didn't self-harm. I was so happy for
Mm,
basically a year.
mm,
And then after that year, I think it was when I was 16,
yeah.
I started to really struggle with eating. And I thought that I never struggled with that before.
Mm,
So that was like completely a new territory for me.
yeah.
But yeah.
So would you mind talking a little bit more about the eating disorder and how it started? Is there anything that you remember as like a first memory
Uh,
of
yeah.
feeling like something just wasn't right?
Well, I saw a photo of myself uh, from dancing class. I took lots of dancing classes in the past years.
Yeah,
Um, and I looked at my body and was shocked. I was absolutely shocked. I was not 300 pounds overweight, but I was not the skinny gymnastics girl anymore, and that's like totally okay. But I was so shocked when I saw that picture and completely bashed myself down for my figure and everything. And in my head, that's the point where it clicked, and I really fell deep into the eating disorder.
so how did the eating disorder manifest in the beginning? Was it exercise, or was it eat controlled eating, or a combination of both?
At first, I'd say it was just reducing my intake,
Mm,
and then slowly, like exercise creeped in, and it like became more and more, and this whole vicious circle.
yeah. So don't worry if you don't want to answer this question, but what would like a typical day look like for you with an eating disorder in like the depths of a bad eating disorder day?
Uh, I'd wake up, go to school, stay as long as I could. I stayed at school for as long as I could too. Just like push, push everything out. Um, and then I'd go to a dancing class, go home, and go to bed. That was it.
So you wouldn't, during those days, how much do you think you were eating?
Well, they were days where I ate pretty like regularly,
Yeah,
but also a lot of days in like the very beginning of the eating disorder where I wouldn't eat at all.
wow. And then you were dancing as well
Yeah,
and spending your whole day at school, so probably using a lot of energy up.
yeah,
So you must have felt extremely exhausted, I
yeah.
imagine.
I think in the beginning I didn't even realize it that much because well, I was not like naturally very skinny, so my body was not exhausted that fast.
Okay, but it was only when you started to lose more weight that
Yeah,
over time that you started to become more exhausted.
yeah,
Um, when did your parents recognize this, or did they
yeah.
recognize?
I was actually in a summer camp at the beginning of the eating disorder,
Mm,
and I called my parents from there and told them I can't eat here. I was I was so puzzled and like I was so confused. I didn't know what was going on. I called them and I was crying. I was like, Mom, Dad, I can't eat here. I don't know why. I just can't. What's going on?
yeah,
And they also didn't know what to say because like they didn't knew me that in that
yeah.
way. Mm. So they kind of knew from the beginning. And then I'd say like a year later, I really opened up to them and told them like I love writing lists. So
Yeah,
I came to them with like a list of stuff that was going on in my head and but also possible solutions. And I told them about like treatment and all that stuff.
that's very mature of a 16-year-old to be able to do that.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It was good that I did it, I think, because I knew that they didn't know what to
Was
do.
going on. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's it, isn't it? Like I remember when I opened up to my parents about what was going on, and it was very much the same thing where I just didn't understand it.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know what an eating disorder was. I think I'd looked on Google and like
Yeah.
searched why do I feel guilty when I eat? Because I actually didn't want to feel like that and I didn't want to live my life in this way. But equally I didn't understand it. And my parents, probably similar to your parents, are in a different generation where
Yeah.
people don't have mental illness and we don't
Yeah.
talk about that. And like so what you did was actually incredible because you've been like, look, I don't think you'll understand this, neither do I, but I've done
Yeah.
some research and this is what I think we need to do for me to get better.
Yeah.
So what did that look like from that original conversation with your parents? Did you then go to the doctors and explain what was going on and get support that way?
Yeah, I went to the doctors with my mom, I think, and he diagnosed me with anorexia, and then I'm very lucky. I have a very nice doctor. He immediately searched for inpatient treatment, and I actually went inpatient like a few months later, which was really good. I didn't stay for that long because school started again and I wanted to go to school.
Oh.
Um, but yeah, it was
So
actually quite good.
how long were you an inpatient? Because I've I've never worked. I've done worked on psychiatric wards before. I've never
Yeah,
done eating disorder ward, but I know that eating disorder wards, if it's all females, can be quite bad for picking up behaviors and kind
yeah,
of copying each other, and like it's it's similar to what you said about the self harm. Like there's a lot of trends. So if someone's not eating
yeah,
for a full day, nobody else will eat for a full day. Did you have that where you were, or I mean, if you weren't there for long, it must have been
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, well, I was there for I think 7 or 8 weeks.
Okay.
And so like quite a bit, but not too long. Um, and it was for kids and there were I think 7 other girls with all different kinds of mental illnesses, but
Oh,
most
so
of them
not
had anorexia. I think
okay.
there was one with OCD too. Yeah, I think that was basically it. And well, I was 18 at that point, and it was very triggering for me to see the girls because they were so much younger than me,
Yeah, I bet.
and they all had this kid's body, plus then anorexia and weight loss and all this stuff. And I was basically a woman at this point,
Yeah.
and that was very, very triggering for me at first.
So, what would you mind talking a little bit about what life was like in an average day on the wards with it in this eating disorder unit?
Well, we would wake up at I think 7, and then the workers there would like check our vitals and all that stuff,
Yeah.
and we'd go to breakfast. Actually, I was in a wheelchair. I don't know. I When you go there, you have to stay in a wheelchair at first until
Were you?
your heart
Is that
rate is okay and all that stuff. And yeah, we'd have breakfast then and go to like a group room, play games or something, go to a snack room, have our snacks, then go back to the group room. It was all back and forth the whole day for
yeah,
just, we would just go from like the eating room to the game room to the eating room to the game room.
yeah.
Yeah,
And how did you find it being away from your parents in and your friends and everything in this ward for like 8 weeks? Was that hard?
it was so hard for me. I didn't know that I was a person who missed home so much, but I
Oh,
felt so miserable because everything was so controlled, and I didn't like the food there. And then they also found out that I had celiac disease.
okay.
So, but they couldn't give me gluten-free food, which is kind of crazy in like a in a clinic that is about food. Um,
Seriously. So what?
yeah,
So what would you eat when you were there?
I just get like what the other people there would get, like bread and all that stuff.
But you're gluten intolerant.
Yeah, so it was like extra harm. Like my body was already exhausted because it was a completely different eating schedule and everything.
Hmm.
Plus, then I'm eating food that I'm allergic to. So
God.
that was really crazy for me.
Oh my gosh.
And I felt so uncomfortable there. Plus, my family was on family vacation, like 14 hours away.
Oh no.
So, yeah.
But how did you communicate with friends and family? Were you allowed phones?
Yeah, we were allowed phones for like an hour a day. It it
And,
was okay.
and did they limit like social media use or anything, or was you were allowed to use social media?
We were allowed to use social media, but most of us just used the time to call our parents and stuff. So
Yeah. So how did you get through that? Because
yeah.
honestly, that sounds awful. So
Yeah.
I mean, you're so strong because like you've gone in there clearly in quite a bad place to
Yeah.
be admitted to then 2 months, which isn't in a huge amount of time really to
Yeah.
be in hospital recovering from an eating disorder. So yeah, how did you do that? How did you have the mental capacity plus an eating disorder to be able to overcome that?
Well, I did get along with the girls quite well. We
Oh,
were
that's good.
very good friends. And I, I kind of quit the treatment after 7 weeks, because I was 18 and then I was allowed to like decide for myself if I wanted to stay or not. So that was really a thing that helped me get through it because I
Mm,
know that I could just go home anytime.
yeah. So how was life when you got home transitioning from being in on a psychiatric ward where you're basically I know these wards, and you are literally watched for everything, every single thing that you do.
Yeah.
Um, every hour of the day, you're observed. Obviously, you're observed when you're eating.
Yeah.
So yeah, how was that moving back home after having that?
It was quite chaotic because I also switched schools in that year, but it did felt like a new beginning, but I knew that I wasn't even near to recovery.
Yeah.
I did try to orientate on the meal plan that I had in the clinic because I thought that was actually like quite good.
Mm,
So I think like for a month or so it went pretty well. Then I did slip back and
relapse. Yeah, I
yeah,
think I don't know what the percentage of individuals who have anorexia or any eating disorder within the first year. I think it's quite high that the chance of relapse.
yeah,
So then you relapsed,
yeah.
slip, and what did the slip look like?
Well, I just went back to my old habits,
Yeah,
like sports and eating less and the whole vicious circle again.
yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you get out of the the slip?
Well, it actually lasted pretty long. It lasted probably a whole year.
Wow.
And then I was 19 at that point.
Yeah,
Um, so November 2022, I was at such a bad place. I was absolutely miserable, and I was actually on the waiting list for another clinic. Well, during the past year, I was at a treatment center again, but only for 2 weeks because that was even worse than the first.
yeah,
And then I was on a waiting list again, and it just was at a point where I could not stay at home anymore. And my doctor sent me to another clinic, and I only spent 2 hours there waiting for a doctor. And I don't like to use the word traumatized because I think that's very like a critical word, but this situation really was so traumatizing for me when I waited there because
in what way?
it was a waiting room for a psychiatric clinic,
Yeah,
and I did not expect anything because it's a clinic, but they really put all patients to every department in one room, and there were people screaming, people crying.
oh,
It was when you see a psychiatric clinic in the movies, well, you know that's not always the reality, but
you're
that
yeah,
was literally it. That was what I experienced there, and I was so
yeah.
shocked. This was like the first moment of clarity that I had in a year.
Where you're like, I don't want to be, I want to get
Yeah,
better because I cannot be here.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That was literally it. And then I actually made an Instagram just
I,
to hold
yeah.
myself accountable. And I told the clinic that I wanted to leave immediately. I took the bus, the train back home, and it went pretty good then.
And so that's from then to now, today is,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So what's been, how have you managed the eating disorder from that moment when you looked and you were like, no way am I staying on this psychiatric ward, I'm going home, I'm getting better. Obviously that's a very flick of the switch, but and
yeah,
there's that sounds very simple, but I'm
yeah,
sure there's been a lot of work that's gone into your recovery, and you're probably still on that recovery journey, because I think even now, me that's had anorexia 10 over 10 years ago, I'm still on that journey of self-love and
Yeah.
understanding myself and understanding my triggers. So how do you manage those thoughts on a day-to-day basis?
Well, at first, I didn't have to deal with a lot of thoughts at first because I had such a brain fog. It was absolutely ridiculous, but it did help me in the
Yeah,
beginning because I just like didn't have to deal with it.
yeah,
And when it started to like creep more in again, and when like the ed voice got louder, I was actually quite stabilized. I don't know if you can say it like that, but I was pretty good at that point, so it just didn't bother me. But I
mm,
also journaled a lot. That was what helped me the most, I think. And
yeah.
I got a new therapist, and I really get along with her very, very well. So that really helped me.
What do you think makes a good therapist? I've asked this question before, but it's very rare that because people will go a lot of their life trying to find the right therapist for them. So when you do find the right therapist, obviously you hold on to them.
Yeah.
Um, so what makes this therapist so great?
Well, we have quite the same interests, I think. Well, I'm really interested in like the medical stuff of an eating disorder and like what's going on in your brain and all that stuff. And she writes like articles about that. So that was like a main reason why I chose her to be my therapist.
Yeah.
And yeah, she just listens. And I don't want to sound like super in love with myself or something,
Mm.
but I feel like I know a lot about eating disorders and I know a lot about recovery, but I just don't know how to do it myself. And she knows that as well. Like she tells me, okay, Joe, you know that, but you have to do
Yeah,
it. So we're like on one wave. So that's pretty
good.
good. Yeah.
And how often do you see this therapist?
Currently once a week, but she's actually pregnant, so I'm getting a new therapist next week.
Oh,
So yeah,
oh no.
yeah.
So how long do you think you'll be away from? Have you met this new therapist yet?
No, not yet. I will meet her next week. I'm
And
excited, but also very anxious about it.
yeah, I was going to say that must be quite a scary experience to go from what you
Yeah,
know and what's
yeah,
helped to this brand new person who knows nothing about you and you've got to kind of
yeah,
start again.
yeah,
But luckily, you're kind of a bit further along in your recovery journey now.
yeah.
And like your Instagram page is amazing. And
Thank you so
you've
much.
got such a community on there.
Thanks.
Um, and is that something that you're spending a lot of time on at the moment, obviously, whilst you're taking some time out to and I guess that is your journal, isn't it?
Yeah,
Instagram. It's
it
like
is
your
kind of,
outlet.
yeah.
And do you get people with eating disorders messaging you and saying they're going through recovery, or maybe even on the other end where they think they have an eating disorder and they've seen your page? Do you receive things like that? And if you do, how do you deal with that as someone who's also still recovering?
Well, I've met amazing people there. I actually made quite a few friends,
I love that.
and that's amazing. But I do also get lots of messages that where like people tell me about their day and how they eat and all that stuff. And well, it didn't trigger me for quite a long time, but right now I stuff has been getting hard for me like recently,
Mm,
and I get so many messages right now about from people telling me about their day and all that stuff. And it's really hard because I do want to help, but also I'm not a therapist and I'm going through my own stuff. And
Yeah.
I do know that I have to protect myself.
Yeah.
And so I feel kind of bad when I don't answer because I I do want to build a community on Instagram. And that's obviously all, well, most of my day right now because I'm not in school right now. Um, but also I just can't deal with it right
No,
now.
you need to put yourself first, and
Yeah,
it's very difficult because I know from my personal experience with an eating disorder, you just want to fix
yeah,
everyone's problems and you
yeah,
want everyone to be where you are
yeah,
now or to be fully recovered.
yeah,
And sometimes in doing that, you can put yourself 5 steps back. I mean, I've
yeah.
had that experience personally, um, where someone I know has had an eating disorder and I've been
Oh,
recovered,
yeah,
and then I've tried to support them, and through supporting them, I've gone back
yeah.
to be in that way. So it's definitely a balance, and obviously what you're doing on Instagram is actually incredible.
Thank you
And
so
I
much.
really do think your page is one of the best eating disorder pages I've seen because it's so authentic. Your videos are great, and some of the content that you share is actually really, really interesting, and it's very different. Um, and just the way that you've like the whole aesthetic of the page is great.
Thank you so,
As
so
someone
much.
who's a more would you say you're creative because you're going obviously more software engineering route?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say I'm creative at all. I
Well,
just,
it does not come across like that.
well, I think I sometimes maybe just know how to like
Yeah,
package what I know, that it comes across like I am like super creative.
yeah. Did you have to did you have to read about Instagram before you started this Instagram page and learn a little bit more about building a community, or did you just go in there with your eyes closed and just hope for the best?
Yeah, I just went in there. I also didn't have Instagram for 1 or 2 years before. Actually, I deleted it because it was so, well, it affected my mental health very negatively.
Yeah,
And well, obviously it was kind of my own fault because I searched for triggers.
yeah,
I do have to say that. Like I'm not saying that Instagram is like bad for your mental health, but
yeah.
if
But it can be because there's so many images available, and
yeah,
even if it's not you're not searching, because I know now that Instagram's banned a lot anything self harm imagery or
yeah,
anything that's promoting mental health related issues.
yeah,
They've just banned it for like hashtags, but um, there's still I think in the world of eating disorders and body image, there's still very much a huge amount of imagery that's available without you having to search for it. So
yeah,
people that are in bikinis
yeah,
looking
yeah,
extremely toned,
yeah,
and people putting pictures on of their really healthy food, and like that for someone with an eating disorder is extremely triggering without having to see someone with an actual eating disorder.
yeah,
So I can see where you're coming from, and I think the community that we have now, this I'm saying we because we're part of this, mental
yeah,
health community. That's so nice. Like I log on to that away from my personal Instagram, and it's just nice. There's just
yeah,
people supporting each other. Um, there's nice quotes or there's information, and it seems like everyone just wants to support each other, which
yeah,
isn't really the case on
yeah,
an personal Instagram. It's like, how can I make my life look as best as it possibly is?
yeah,
Whereas I think with the mental health community, it's like, right, life can actually be pretty shit sometimes. And I want people to be aware of that.
yeah,
I think something that I wanted to ask you as well, as you kind of touched a little bit on it, is friendships and
Oh, yeah,
how they have been affected with your eating disorder, because obviously you spent some time in an inpatient and then you relapsed again for a year. So has that affected your friendships?
for sure. Yes. Well, I was pretty outgoing before the eating disorder, and I well, I didn't have like lots of very close friends, but I had like several groups that I could go to,
Mm.
and I lost contact with most of the people there, which sometimes I think it's not that bad because like we weren't such close friends, but still sometimes it's just sad because people are like going their ways, or they're obviously were in the same school for a year more than I was, and I just
Mm.
felt kind of left out.
Oh,
But it was like not their fault, it was not my fault, so I kind of made peace with it.
yeah. I think, yeah, that's it's definitely normal to feel left behind when they're all
Yeah.
going on and doing different things. Um, did they understand what was happening to you?
Yeah, I think most people understood. I know that like one of my closer friends, when I told her that I had anorexia and that I struggled, it was such a vulnerable moment for me. And I love her from the bottom of my heart still. We're very good friends. But she took a step back, looked me up and down, and went, "Oh, I didn't notice you have anorexia."
Oh,
And
the
I
worst
was
thing that you
so
can say to
shocked.
someone with an eating disorder.
Yeah, I was so shocked in that moment. I did not know what to say. That this just is like embroidered in my head.
Yeah, because obviously with an eating disorder, as bad as it sounds, when you are in that place, you want to be skinny. So technically,
Yeah,
you do want to look like someone who has an eating disorder, which
yeah,
no matter how much you want to get better,
yeah,
which I always did, I always wanted to get better. And I was
yeah,
very much aware of what was going on, but
yeah,
it doesn't take away the fact that you want to be skinny. It's about
yeah,
being skinny, and that not about being skinny even from an aesthetic point of view, but just because
yeah,
of being in control.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean that was must have been really hard. I was 15, so younger than you, but at the time, but I found it really hard being at school and having an
yeah,
eating disorder and dealing with like girls and just being young, and
yeah.
sometimes girls aren't very nice
No,
when they're young. And yeah, I definitely didn't get the support from any
yeah,
of my friends
oh yeah,
um, at the time. And then I luckily and recovered and went on to sixth form and met some great people there and have some really amazing friends. But I definitely lost friends in the process of an eating disorder, because you just naturally isolate yourself,
yeah,
and you stop doing all the things that they're doing. So if they're going
yeah,
to do something that might involve food or that's going to take you away from your routine, you'll avoid
yeah,
it.
yeah,
So you do naturally lose friends, but it's great that you've been able to keep this friend, even
yeah,
if she did say something. But at the end of the
yeah,
day, I think what you've got to understand, which you don't understand at the time, is that some people just don't get it, which is
yeah,
completely normal, because how can you understand why I didn't even get it. So how
yeah,
can somebody who's
yeah,
not going through it at the time get it? And that's the difficulty, is like trying to say, people probably think they're treading on eggshells, trying to say the right things, do the right things without offending you.
yeah.
which is hard. So in terms of today, and you said you're struggling a little bit at the moment, is that with the eating? Is that with the exercise? Do you think there's any triggers that have made you feel like you're slipping back again?
I went on a family vacation with my family like 4 or 5 weeks ago, and obviously that means getting out of routine and stuff. And I
Mm,
know that routines are not my best friend. I think that's maybe it's like an eating disorder thing. Like routines
definitely
are,
is.
yeah. And but I do also need kind of like a structure in my day to not dip into the depression again. So it's a balance.
Yeah.
And in in vacation, it was just really hard for me because obviously you eat with your family the whole day, and we don't have that at home as much because my parents are working, my siblings are at school, and it was so different. And then with the different daily routine there, maybe you're just having 2 meals instead of three. And this small changes really triggered the eating disorder. And I don't even know why. Maybe my head was already slipping back a bit before, but this really triggered the eating disorder into that, oh well, if we don't have like 3 meals now, we can have that home as well.
Mm,
So I did struggle with eating on vacation a lot, and also with exercising because I run a lot and I
yeah.
really genuinely enjoy it.
Yeah.
But on vacation, we were at like a mountain destination, so like, running is a bit different there because of the and all that stuff. And I didn't run as I would at home, which is nothing crazy, but it's just like these small changes, I think, that
Yeah.
really triggered my head a bit.
Yeah. And I get that because running used to be my thing as well.
Yeah.
And the thing is with running is you become very dependent on
Yes.
that form of exercise, and
Yeah.
it's probably the only form of not only form of exercise, but so I strength train now. I did just do a
Yeah.
half marathon, um, which was the first time I've ran since, really, because it's a it's very addictive because of the runner's
Yeah.
high as well.
Yeah.
So not only do you have like the aspect of being exercise dependent with an eating disorder, but you've also got the runner's high as well.
Yeah.
So it really does become addictive. And I completely resonate with you in terms of um, feeling bad if you haven't exercised for
Yeah.
a certain amount of time. And there's such a correlation between eating disorders and exercise
Yeah.
dependence. Like usually they come pretty hand in hand. And I
Yeah.
think for me, it was almost like the eating part wasn't really an issue in the end. It was just
Yeah.
the exercise and like
Yeah.
feeling that real need to exercise. And then if I
Yeah.
don't exercise, I can't eat as much the next day, that
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
But but even it was the mood thing, and I think that's
Yeah.
actually really normal as well. And it's being able to try and find that balance of like, I want to go for a run because it helps my mental health
Yeah.
and it makes
Yeah.
me feel great,
Yeah.
but I don't want it to become an addiction as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and for me, honestly, when I was recovering, it was never really, obviously it was the eating was hard. The eating part was
Yeah.
hard, and having
Sure.
to
Yeah.
put a meal plan was hard. But what was hard was being told you can't exercise
Yeah.
because it exercise is such a big part of your mental health. So having that taken away from you no matter whether you've got an eating disorder or not, is difficult. But I think it's being able to manage the urge to become obsessive with it.
Yeah.
So I very much resonate with what you're going through. And I suppose that kind of leads on to the last 2 points around, firstly, managing. So, like, thank you for being brave enough and to just say today, actually, I am struggling, because it's easy to come on and have, and I appreciate you even coming on and having this conversation with me today, knowing that you're not in 100% like mental space. Like, thank you for that. And thank you for being honest, because I think people listening to this right now might be struggling with an eating disorder, and it's okay to be struggling, and it's okay
Yes.
to be recovering and still have those moments or months or few months
Yeah.
where it is a bit shit.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's important to just know that that is normal, but equally you can get out of it.
Yeah.
So so in terms of that, where how do you think you're managing that right now? Is there anything that you're doing that, if someone's listening right now that might be in a similar place to you, that that is helping a little bit with this blip?
Well, I think asking for help, because that's what I really learned the past months, that if you're able, well, if you have people around, you can ask them for help. For
Yeah,
example, I asked my dad a lot of times to prepare my breakfast because I struggle a lot with that, and I know myself, and I know that I would make adjustments that were like that wouldn't be that good for my physical and mental health.
yeah,
So I asked him, "Hey Dad, can you prep this?" Or like, can we like go on a walk together so I don't like sprint the whole thing? And that
yeah,
really helps me. I would really recommend that to anyone going through difficult times. If you can, ask.
yeah. I think that's so important, and leaning on those around you for support, because
Yeah,
that's what they're there for. I
yeah,
know it's sometimes difficult with parents
yeah,
because you're their daughter, and
yeah,
they probably just want you to be better again, but it's not
yeah,
that easy. And I think what you've touched on throughout this podcast, which is really important, is kind of like hand holding
yeah,
your parents sometimes, and like outlining, like, this is what's going on, this is the solution, how can we do this together?
yeah,
It's very easy to assume that because they're your parents, that they'll be able to fix it, because that's what parents have always been there for, to
yeah,
fix the problem. And sometimes they just can't fix
yeah,
it, and they're probably going to have times where they're going to say things that are triggering or that aren't very helpful.
yeah,
But I think, like you said, just giving them the ability to help. And like, I love that idea of breakfast, because your dad probably really feels like in that moment that he's really, really helping you.
yes, yeah,
And that probably makes him feel better about himself, because he can't fix the problem, but by
yeah,
doing these little acts of service, almost, he probably feels quite fulfilled, and like he is doing the best that he possibly can.
yes. He always asks me, "What can I do to help you? What do you want me to do?" Well, we have a pretty good communication, so
Yeah,
it's more easy for me
yeah,
to talk to him, and he's just so happy when I tell him, "Oh, Dad, can you please do that?" And I always feel kind of stupid almost to ask someone to cook food. I'm 19. Like my head tells me, what, like you're an adult, you can do that.
yeah,
But then also, I see that my dad is just so happy that he can do anything for me. That
yeah,
helps me a bit. My parents always reassure
She's
me.
amazing.
Yeah, they always reassure me that when I ask them for help, that it's fine and that they're rather happy about it.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I completely agree. Um, so I think that's probably coming to the end of the conversation. I've had you for quite a while. Um, but thank you so much for sharing your experience, and again for being brave enough to just say I'm not 100% at the moment, but also giving some great advice on what you can do in those moments where it's not that great, and to keep going, because it's very easy to just give up.
Yeah.
But I think you're a very, very strong person. um Definitely keep on the Instagram, because I think
Thank you so
that's
much.
great. I'll actually share, if you don't mind,
Yeah,
the
sure.
Instagram,
Yeah.
so anyone can follow it who's listening if they're not already following your Instagram page.
Thank you.
Um, but good luck with everything, and
Thank you so
you
much.
are an absolute inspiration, and keep going, because it will all get better in the end, and you've got this far, so I'm sure you'll be able to get out of this small blip.
Thank you so, so much. And also, thank you so much for inviting me and also for sharing about your story a bit because I resonate so much with it. So thank you.
Good. Yeah, I think it's so important to share that, because
Yeah,
once you share these stories, you realize that everyone is going through exactly the same thing,
yeah,
and at the time it feels like what you experience is so different to what the other person is experiencing, but a lot of
yeah,
the time these mental health issues are very, very similar, especially when you've got eating disorders.
yeah,
They're very similar, but I hope that I'm sat here today
yeah,
over 10 years later, and I have fully recovered. I don't think you ever fully recover,
yeah, yeah,
fully recover. I think it's a journey, but I am living a very, very happy life, accepting of myself, accepting of my body. So it is possible. So you can absolutely do it. And I hope in 10 years' time, you'll look back and be like, I'm so glad I got through that blip. I'm a software engineer or whatever you're
yeah.
doing. And it did get better. So much for listening to the episode today. I hope this episode has resonated with you and offered insights, comfort, and most importantly, the knowledge that you are not alone. Remember, your mental health journey is unique, just like you are. It's okay to have good days and bad days, and it's okay to seek help and support when you need it. You are strong, resilient, and capable of navigating life's challenges. If you found value in today's episode, please consider subscribing to our channel and sharing this podcast with someone who might benefit from it. And if you'd like to hear more about specific topics or have any questions, please leave a comment below. We're here to support and empower each other. Together, we can break the stigma surrounding mental health and create a more compassionate and understanding world. If you haven't already, please do check out our Facebook community group, which is a non-judgmental space for you guys to share your stories, experiences, and support each other. As we close the episode, please do remember to take a moment for some self-care, whether it's a deep breath, a walk in nature, or a simple act of kindness to yourself. Remember to nurture your mental well-being after these conversations. Thank you so much for being part of our community. I appreciate you all so, so much. And also, if you are listening and feel like you could have a story to share, please do drop me a Instagram message, email me at info@vitamindose.co, or you can also go to the website and fill in a form at www.vitamindose.co. Thank you so much, and I will see you next week.